committees, and I'm not going to list for you because there are committees and subcommittees, but he does serve on the subcommittee, Water Resources and Environment, which he's going to talk to us tonight. He knows, his staff knows about all the problems we've had in the North End with flooding. A couple other things he may touch on: healthcare, ACA, Medicare, gun control, because it's in the news. He's going to speak for a while, talk about his legislative agenda, and then we'll take questions. So I'll call on folks and identify yourself and ask one question so that we can let everybody get an opportunity to ask questions. So without further ado, please.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, David. Thank you all for being here. And I know that initially when I was asked to speak, the issue of climate change and resiliency was high up on our list of concerns. And then over the past month or so, we've had issues on the border. Mexico, we've had a gun control issue, El Paso and Dayton and California. Issues of impeachment regarding the president, that process has rolled out. So even though this is probably my principal part of my presentation, I want to open it up to whatever issues, and I've heard some other issues just going around the room that people have raised. So this is my last stop for the night, so I can stay and hopefully answer all the questions that you might have, and we aren't stuck on any one issue, but I did make a promise that I would try to address some of the issues around climate change as it affects the North End. And so recently we had Mayor Walsh had a wonderful presentation over the Parkman House, and it went neighborhood by neighborhood across the city. And I was surprised to find out that a lot of my district, going back to 1630, was actually underwater. And if things continue at the current rate, it'll be back underwater by 2070. I just took a couple of the maps out of, and I apologize, I stole these from Mayor Walsh. So this basically reflects, and it's very easy to understand, the blue areas are areas that are currently under stress. So this is the present situation in the North End, where the blue area denotes an area that's under pressure because of coastal flooding, right? So it's coastal flooding. The teal areas are areas of the North End that are affected because of rainfall. So these are areas that flood out when we have periods of rain exceeding 6 hours. So they flood out. So part of the response has to be infrastructure for the rain. It exceeds the sewage capacity that we have in the North End. The drainage does not occur, so it'll require major infrastructure in terms of sewage and sewer systems to make sure that this is mitigated. The incidence of major rainfall events has increased dramatically over the past 7 years. So where we used to experience, I think, between 5 and 7 of those events per year, we're now experiencing up to 20, so 17 to 20. So it's a warning to us of the trend that's developing. This is, don't be that much afraid, but this is 27, and this is what we have to prepare for. These areas are threatened by coastal and by excessive rainfall, these areas here. This sort of looks like this, if you took and superimposed the map of Boston in 1630, so it looks like this, right? There's one peninsula at the north end, connected by a narrow neck of land. Most of this has been, all of this has been really landfill, and obviously the wharfs were physical structures extended out into the harbor to accommodate shipping. So this is what we're looking at if we do nothing. And so it instructs us on the measures that we have to take. And right now, we're actually debating a major piece of legislation in the House of Representatives. We're having negotiations directly with the White House. I've been asked to represent Massachusetts. Mike Capuano, who at one time represented the North End from Somerville, he was on the Transportation Committee. When he lost his election to Representative Presley, he obviously came off the Transportation Committee. It was nobody from Massachusetts or New England at that point that could watch out for our interests. So Speaker Pelosi and Rich Neal came to me and asked me to take the Transportation Committee. Myself, my own background, having been an iron worker for 20 years, my engineering degree is in construction management with a civil engineering piece. They thought that I would be a good match for that. So right now we're, the president, for all his faults, fancies himself as a builder. And so this is probably one of the narrow areas where we might be able to work together on an initiative that actually works to the great benefit of the American people. The problem is how to pay for this. And we are aiming for, and the president has put this out, a $2 trillion transportation bill. Those are his words, and that's our goal. So how do you raise the $2 trillion over a period of 10 years to pay for that? One of the proposals, just a proposal, is to increase the gas tax. It would be a 5-cent increase on the gas tax for 5 years in a row. So it would be a 25-cent increase. That only gets us to about $400 billion, right? And the overall price tag is $2 trillion. So the negotiations right now are how to come up with the extra money to pay for that. The problem with the gas tax increase is that more and more of our vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient. We're using electric vehicles. So the revenue from taxes going into that transportation trust fund, it's a diminishing asset, right? As people start using more and more electric cars, hybrid cars, that asset decreases. So we've got to figure out other ways to meet that obligation. But I think that there are a lot of major metropolitan areas that are confronting the same problem we are, whether they are in red states or blue states. I think most members of Congress, whether they're House or Senate, recognize the need to get this done. And there is a consensus around the need for the infrastructure improvements, and I think that the only difference is how do we pay them, which is the more difficult part. So with that, I don't know if there's anything. Well, let me just say this. So I'm on the I chair the subcommittee on national security, and this affects the North End in a way. You wouldn't think it, but it does. So back in 2009, I think, President Obama passed an executive order and actually ordered that the Defense Department and other government agencies look at federal facilities and make sure that whatever we do in terms of renovating, establishing, closing, modifying any federal facility, that we take into consideration the effects of climate change. What's important for the North End is that we have the United States Coast Guard station here, and that's critical infrastructure. So the benefits that we might, well, let's put it this way, the benefits that may be demanded because of that federal facility, because of the U.S. Coast Guard station, will also, I think, positively impact the North End, at least along that jetty and along that part of our waterfront. How long that extends and what the direct measures might be has to be worked out by the Army Corps of Engineers and the United States Coast Guard. But it does give us a leg up to get some money into the North End area, to have them spend it on the North End because of the fortunate location of the United States Coast Guard station on the north end. I think that's about it on the climate change piece. I know that Mayor Walsh is very much involved. He has I think it's Boston 2030 area, the program. So we are working, actually, Governor Baker, Mayor Walsh came down to DC recently to talk about this issue, especially with, and Stephanie Pollack, the Transportation Secretary, to talk about what the priorities would be across Massachusetts and what our critical infrastructure is. And they've been very helpful. I have to say that even talking to those leaders as well as the other members of the Massachusetts congressional delegation, there's a lot of agreement. Not one for one, not 100%, but I would say at this point, I think most members, the ideas that I get from most members that are their priorities, members of Congress, coincide very neatly with the mayors from their district and the state officials, the Massachusetts State Senate, state representatives, as well as the governor himself. So there's a lot of harmony there. Again, the strategy for us will be how do we actually pay for this, and how do we do this long term, because there are some major costs and very diverse needs out there. In my district, I represent from the north end and all the way over to Dedham, all the way down to Situate. Situate is a coastal community, so every single time you hear of a big winter storm, it's Situate. So I've got seawalls going up down there. I represent Bridgewater, East Bridgewater, and West Bridgewater, and it's riverine flooding down in that area. So it's a total different approach to the climate change needs of each of these communities. In Norwood and Walpole, I've got earthen dams that are flooded, and I need to dredge some of the areas there and the ponds in those communities to preserve, the river flow in that area, which also threatens some homes. So the Army Corps and I have become very, very close working partners on all of this. But I don't know if it would be good at this time just to open it up for questions regarding.
Yeah, we can switch around.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and identify yourself.
Jane Knox. I'm very curious and eager to hear what plans are being made to prevent the water rise coming over the blue area that you're showing. In other words, what schemes or ideas are being developed to prevent the inevitable that we seem to be heading to?
Yeah. So it's an issue of there is not one 100% solution, but there is 101% solutions. So in some cases, where, as in the teal area here, they're talking about redoing our infrastructure, our sewer system itself, increasing the capacity. I know that in the South Boston, Dorchester area, the outfall, the sewer system there that steers everything into Deer Island used to be about this big around. So now it's probably 6 foot in diameter pipe. They took out the old one, put in the new one so it handles more capacity, so that you don't have overflow. In some of these areas, they're actually talking about raising certain roadways to increase the elevation. I know there was a bus route that was recently, we paid a lot of money for repaving and rebuilding a number of bus routes. I think some of those actually go into the north end. They'll have to be redone at a higher elevation because of the projections that we have. The other thing is when construction firms come in or architects come in and propose new buildings, they're required to build with climate change and a rising sea level in mind, both to handle their own sewage and store stormwater, but also making sure that structurally they can withstand the increase in elevation. We just had a project over on the waterfront that was proposed by, I think it was, I forget the name of the company, one of the big firms that was like a 30-story high-rise. And they had to go back to the drawing board because of the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, because the overwash on their property from projected coastal flooding put them in a flood zone. So they had to move it back from the water, which allowed us also to put sort of a harbor walk in front of their building. But also, it moved them back from the water to protect them from that overflooding. So there are a lot of things that we can do. I know that so in Dorchester, which is another area that's threatened because of its very close to sea level, the mayor has put forward a plan to build a berm. So it's an earthen hill that runs along the coast so that when we get those big storms, they don't come in, sweep over into, I think, Columbus Park, the Joe Moakley, used to be Columbus, now it's Joe Moakley Park in Dorchester and Salt. So the mayor's trying to come up with sort of a menu of options that we could use in various areas of the city to try to push back or keep back flooding. But it's a complicated problem. I know that one of the cities, I believe it's Copenhagen, has come up with a number of devices through drainage, pumps, and infrastructure to try to raise the elevation. They're actually below sea level in parts of their city, but they're sort of a model right now for a lot of other cities around the world.
They raise the land
Yeah, they build it up. Yeah.
underneath the buildings that exist?
No, not those buildings. I mean, that's how the harbor became land, right? I mean, it was filled. Yeah. So that's how it became land. What they're trying to do now is to increase the elevation on some of those areas and create a perimeter wall or berm to keep the water back.
On the national stage, is there a conversation going on? You said if we do nothing, 2070 looks like this.
Yeah.
There has to be a conversation also going on, how can we help stop this from actually happening? So talking about as a country, how we can maybe stop contributing to climate change by, I mean, I know we're not going to convince the country to become environmentalists like overnight, but is that conversation going hand in hand with the infrastructure stuff, which is clearly very important, but maybe helping like stop or reverse some
Yeah,
of the climate change
so one of
happening?
the big bills, as soon as the Democrats took control in January, one of the first bills that we have is the Climate Action Now bill, which incorporates a lot of the ideas that you speak of, from reduction in the use of fossil fuels, using renewables whenever possible, incentivizing renewable industries, solar, wind, and also putting penalties on carbon emissions that are generated by traditional, fossil fuel systems. So that is sitting over in the Senate, and as of yet, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has not allowed the bill to come before. But there was a lot of support from it for the bill in the House. We even had some Republicans on board with us, but that has not been the case in the Senate. To be honest with you, in a lot of cases, the Senate right now is where good ideas go to die, unfortunately. So we send bills over, and at the very least, like in that case, if you don't like our bill, then make the changes that you think are necessary and send it back to us, or let's go to a conference and try to figure out the difference. but in many cases, they choose to take it up, to respond to legislation, which is really what legislating is all about. Of course, there's 435 members of the House and 100 senators. We're not going to all, agree on everything just like that. We've got to work things out. So that process needs to happen, and it's not happening right now, unfortunately. So we're hoping to put more pressure on the majority. I don't like to be too political, but this is how it's working right now, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi.
Dave Roderick, North End. You mentioned Copenhagen. Your group, have you been studying or getting information from the Netherlands? There's been programs on, there was one on one of those science shows, and they were explaining a lot of the stuff that the Netherlands are doing.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. I mean, the ideas that are there, maybe this country could start to learn from them.
No, I absolutely agree, Dave. I think that's a perfect example where it was necessary there decades ago, and they've come up with a system to address that. I think some of those ideas are transferable, and some are not. But I think we need to take the best of what the best lessons learned from their own experience, so that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. So yeah, I know that our environmental committee does periodic. We've also gone to Venice. Venice is another area where they're experiencing dramatic increases in sea levels there. Some magnificent treasures are threatened, so they are really motivated to deal with that problem. They are using mostly a pump system, which is very effective, except when they have very heavy rainfall. And it's not capable because the sea level rises, there's no place to actually pump it. But yeah, that's another example of engineering efforts to deal with the same problem.
Congressman Lynch, I appreciate the efforts you're going to, but I can't help but, my name's Wanda Zero, I live in Oregon. I can't help but think that a lot of these measures are treating symptoms rather than causes. For instance, if carbon emissions from automobiles is a major contributor to climate change, then I don't see how elevating a roadway is really going to treat that particular cause. Similarly, when I look at these maps and you say that the blue area represents the land that has been filled in, I see that this is treating again a symptom of climate change rather than the cause, which is degradation of the natural environment. And so, I realize that there's only so much that we can do, but I'm wondering isn't there something, radical mindset that could be impressed upon the constituents? And I don't think that this is a terrible idea to just change the way people think about addressing the problem. Trillions of dollars, why do we have trillions of dollars what about the long-term consequences? What about the global consequences about instituting these measures? What about developing countries, for instance? What about the fact that the reason why people in the world, not everyone has a refrigerator, a washing machine, and an automobile has to do with the fact that if we all had those three things, we as a global community would asphyxiate. I wonder if there's another way to address this rather than just pouring money into problems that then create long-term problems for future generations.
Well, yeah, in a perfect world, it would be great if everybody just got rid of their cars, got rid of their washing machines, got rid of other appliances. I agree with that.
People do.
But I have to, I don't have the ability to tell people, get rid of your car, stop walking. You can build incentives. Now, the gas tax is an incentive to make it more expensive to use your automobile, and it is a direct incentive to seek other modes of transportation. So we're trying to move in that direction. there'll be a lot of angst and opposition to increasing the gas tax by 25 cents per gallon, which some people see as reasonable and necessary. Others are vehemently opposed to that.
You make your livelihood in driving. I mean, a lot of people, they drive for a living. They're bus people. That's hard. Not everyone can live their tax.
Yeah. And we are trying to, if you looked at where we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago on using coal in this country, we used billions of tons more coal as we do now, but we've moved away from that. But I think, in most of the coal country, from West Virginia to Kentucky to even the far west New Mexico, a lot of those coal mines are shut down, and we've moved to a different technology. And unfortunately, we've moved to natural gas. I think is more prevalent now. That's not a good option, but it's better than the use of coal. So I think it takes time to move people and change habits. I think education is a big part of it. I think our younger generation is much more willing to, take a bicycle or, and realize the consequences of using an automobile. I think we need to persuade more people about the dimensions of and the consequences of their habits. I think that's true. And I'm not saying older people in our population are locked in. My mom and dad were recycling before recycling was a word, and so there were some people that got all of this, that you don't waste, you try to conserve and just don't waste. I think that's a healthy attitude. The other piece that I work in is that I have to get 218 votes in the House of Representatives for any measure that we seek to pass. And I'm trying to get 60 votes in the Senate. And there are some in both parties that come kicking and screaming. So even the idea that we're going to raise the gas tax by 25 cents, they've taken a pledge, they've taken an oath that they will not increase taxes at all. So, you got to try to get those people to the table and persuade them that is not a healthy attitude or a viable or sustainable option. We've got to deal with this now. I am signed on to the Green New Deal. However, it seeks to do it in 10 years, and I'm not sure that we have any chance of doing it. But it does set a marker down. I'm also signatory to a bill which requires President Trump to re-engage in the Paris Climate Accord. And even that measure, I think, this is how the Paris Climate Accord works. Each country determines on their own the level of pollution and the level of reduction in fossil fuels that it will start as a target, right? So we do it on our own. It's not like, I know people say, oh, this is all the EU or the World Health Organization or some global body. It's decided by the country itself. So the United States decided under President Obama, how much we could reduce our carbon emissions over the next 20 years. And I think those were mildly aggressive, but I think it was good to be aggressive in this regard. The problem is that when President Trump came in, he pulled us out of the climate accord and said, those people in Europe aren't going to tell us what to do. The people in Europe weren't telling us what to do. We had already decided what our goals would be internally, the people of the United States, right? The President of the United States, the United States Congress. So that argument is a canard. There's no truth in that. Really, us trying to be accountable, holding ourselves accountable, and then also looking at China, India, and other major polluters and say, we're doing this to ourselves, we want you to meet us halfway. And of course, China and India, projected to be, major polluters for the next 20, world leaders in pollution and fossil fuel use in the next 20 years. So we really need those countries to move as well. Hi.
Just to follow up.
Say your name, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mary McGee of the North End. To follow up on the excellent question that was just asked, and I'd like to thank our younger neighbors for reminding us about the urgency of the situation, which is something we seem to forget. That being said, the transportation bill, what initiatives might be included for public transportation, rail systems, things like that?
Yeah, so I think we have put in incentives for electric vehicle manufacturing. We put in measures that would fund research on battery storage. I guess that's the weak link right now between solar and wind power that it needs to be used right away. There aren't effective energy storage cells that last for a very long time. That's one of the weak points in some of the renewable technology. We funded that. There's money there for hydroelectric as well. And also, there are initiatives within the bill that would fund, for example, the city of Brockton that I represent. I think we have been able to, under the previous transportation bill, get them 18 zero-emission buses in the city of Brockton, which have used these old diesel model buses for a very long time. So we replaced all those diesels with zero-emission buses. So there are, also there's a big focus on rail as well. And when you compare rail to trucking in terms of moving cargo, there's a big environmental benefit from using rail instead, as well as for passenger. So there are a lot of things. I think the bill in general, which was written by Democrats for the most part, does recognize the environmental impact on transportation. And I think it's probably the most progressive bill transportation we've seen.
Hi, my name is Ford Cavallari, also from the North End. Just on that question, I want to put a plug in for the North-South rail connection, North Station, South Station rail connection, which is not only a potentially passenger and freight rail connector, but also could serve as the hub of a new transit line in Boston, much like the Thames Link has become in London, where you have subway type trains as well as rail trains going through a common tunnel. We have not had a capacity increase in the central subway in Boston since 1924. Yeah, they've put a couple of stations and assembly and all that, but we, unlike Washington D.C., New York City, almost every city you can name, have done nothing on our subway for almost 100 years now in terms of capacity. We've relocated lines, but we don't create a capacity increase. We need a capacity increase. Our population in Boston has grown probably 20% since its low, and we really could use that help. So I hope in this bill that could be part of it. But that wasn't actually my question. After all this,
I'm going to address that, but go ahead.
Okay, great. With all the environmental issues, which I know are very difficult to solve, but I'm glad that you're trying to do it. I wanted to put a plug in also to maybe for the House to do something that you can do that can help us in a way that's really tuned to what the House is supposed to do. And that is that Boston is being sued right now by Airbnb under an obscure artifact of initial regulation of the internet called the Communications Decency Act Section 230. Airbnb hides behind Section 230, claiming that this federal law preempts all local laws, so essentially you cannot regulate us. That's the crux of their lawsuit, and they have won lawsuits like that all over the country. They have a crack legal team. They've aggregated all the lobbyist lawyers in Washington, D.C. that know anything about this obscure piece of the law. And I used to run a telecom consultancy, so I know a lot about the law. And I can tell you it's being misused like you wouldn't believe, and I can't believe federal judges are being bamboozled by the arguments that they're hearing. But I would also say Uber is also hiding behind the law. Uber was supposed to give the Commonwealth of Massachusetts data, Uber, Lyft, TNC data, part of our 2016 act that Aaron Michaelowicz actually got passed. Our Ways and Means chair now in the House. He's very good. He's awesome. But I mean, I think he's as disappointed as anyone that Uber's not doing what they want, and of course it's because of the Section 230 thing. So there are a bunch of us that are looking at this saying cities can't do anything as long as this artifact remains. And I wanted to ask if you could join a groundswell of some legislators in Washington, D.C. to try to see what we can do to either turn Section 230 back, get rid of it entirely, or at least redefine it so that it's clear that it's not a get out of jail card, so that you don't have to obey state or local laws.
Okay. And I know this has been voiced by a number of big city mayors. I know that San Francisco had a huge problem with it because it's boosting up the cost of the housing is very expensive there already.
Right.
Seattle has a problem with it. New Orleans, New York. I think you mentioned Miami earlier, where they're sort of touristy cities, and Airbnb is actually incentivizing or taking property off the market and pushing up costs. So
Here in Boston too. Yeah.
oh yeah, absolutely here in Boston. Yeah,
Studies.
I actually had some very resourceful neighbors of mine in public housing. Where I grew up. In the Ann Lynch homes, named after my mom, the Old Colony projects, the Ann Lynch home, the Old Colony, they put their apartment, in the housing projects on Airbnb.
I'm familiar with the list.
And got like ridiculous, like $1,700 a week to live in the projects across from the water. And they have the pictures on, because the projects now look so beautiful. So I'm well aware of the problem. As much as I appreciate the ingenuity and innovation there, it's a huge problem. And so we've heard from de Blasio, we've heard from a lot of the mayors around the country saying, look, we can't deal with this while this preemption is in effect. So we need some legislation that would say, notwithstanding the federal law, local cities and towns may regulate, the availability of Airbnb. So then, at least it would be regulatable, I guess, is the word. And so we'll work on that. I do want to touch on the north-south rail link. Here's the problem. So I'm on transportation. We have that proposal, and it's competing with not only proposals in this state, for money for the MBTA and elsewhere, and commuter rail, but we're also competing against other projects around the country, and people are looking at impact. How will this, especially after the big dig, we still have sort of a black eye on transportation money. So we have a higher bar to convince people that we need more transportation money and we're going to use it responsibly. It's just the way it is. So I'm on the transportation, and we float the north-south rail link. And the chairman, back when the Republican chair was there, Chairman Schuster from Pennsylvania, he looks at the proposal, the north-south rail link, and he says, so you want this to go from North Station to South Station? I said, yeah. And he said, but you can go from North Station to South Station right now. You just have to change cars downtown crossing. I said, well, yeah. He said, but that disrupts the flow and all that. He said, so you're telling me you want $8 to $10 billion so your constituents don't have to change trains at downtown crossing. So that's the response I get when I'm in competition with projects around the country. I don't think that's ever going to have a winning argument.
1924. Remember the Red Sox had that T-shirt 1918 prior to 2004 because I hadn't one since 1918. But we haven't expanded the subway. I mean, we just haven't.
get more cars.
So call it a subway tunnel. I mean,
But
you know.
they don't mind giving us money, they just don't want to give us money for that.
Yeah. But
You know what I mean? So that you don't have to change trains.
But we need more mass transit. That's the thing.
But, agreed, and they will give us money, but not for that. They look at the particular project. So you can go from North Station to South Station right now. If you swap trains, you just have to transfer over at downtown crossing. So when I weigh that, okay, so that's the benefit that I'm getting here. I'm gonna build a new tunnel from North Station to South Station at the cost of $10 billion of taxpayer money. So people don't have to swap trains. And then I'm up against somebody else who's, you know, connecting two areas that have no connection. So that's going to lose, that argument's going to lose time and again. I'm just telling you, it's going to lose. And so it's not a, and look, if that's my proposal and it gets turned down, which it's going to, the money goes somewhere else. It doesn't go to Massachusetts, it's our proposal. And so if that gets denied, the guy from Peoria, Illinois wins, you know, or the guy from, you know, Schenectady, New York wins. And so then I gotta wait another year or 2 years to make another proposal for Massachusetts. And if I push this project out again, we're gonna lose again. So it's just, you know, it's just difficult. I know it's, you know, it's got some traction, but,
I'd like to follow up on that though.
yeah, sure.
Why do you keep saying just to go from North Station to South Station? They have that rail link, you can go from Maine to Florida, and you could stop in Boston to get off, but you don't have to even touch the subway system. It should involve Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Why not have the federal funds tell them that the link is the missing link, that you can go from Florida to up to Maine?
You can do that at Change Cars at downtown crossing.
Yeah.
Onto a red line that doesn't work.
But what about people from other states?
You know, others would say, well, you gotta
All those people from New Hampshire are afraid of Boston.
But
They don't pick it up.
we're in competition there.
Well, I understand that,
Yeah.
but if you emphasize North to South Station, it should be a missing link for states for the Amtrak and freight and so forth.
You could activate a Fairmont line, Fairmont to the Encore Hotel that could go through that, or into Everett, Fairmont to Everett, could go through that tunnel. And the Dorchester corridor, if you look at it, has been one of the most discriminated against regarding public transit. I'll shut up. But I mean, basically, there are other winning arguments that can be made, and if offline, maybe your office wants to hear some of us make some, happy to do it. You know, and we're happy to.
Okay, yes, sorry.
I want to change gears.
Thank you.
From what I've heard, that marijuana is going to be legalized at the federal level in the short term, is what I've read and been told.
Well, it's the Mitch McConnell problem again, so I think it's over there, but it's just sitting on his desk. Well, same with the gun bill, but we'll talk about that later.
But I don't understand how if a vet can't have access to marijuana, it doesn't make sense to me. So they should have things. And then I'm in the liquor business, and the federal government does a great job of taxing my product. We should tax the hell out of marijuana and pay for this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, get over the gas tax.
Yeah, so, well, medical marijuana for a veteran is legal, it's already approved. The problem is recreational marijuana, and that's the problem. And I gotta be honest, I wasn't, so I founded a drug rehab facility for adolescents in South Boston. And I started out with the Cushing House for Boys, because we had 16 suicides in a period of about 5 months. And then I was having problems with young women, same problem, OxyContin, heroin. I created the Cushing House for Girls. So about 40 beds each, and I got a line out the door, forget it. So, and it comes from all over the state, not just, you know, we probably have kids from the North End in there, I'm sure. So I was against the legalization of marijuana because you talk to the kids in there, and every single one of them started with marijuana. It didn't mean that if you smoked marijuana, you went to heroin and OxyContin, but it just so happened that this group of kids, forever, they all started with marijuana. And so, you know, there's some type of connection there. It's not causative, it's not causation, but, so I was against it because I'm working the other side, trying to take drugs off the street, and here we want to put drugs on the street. So I thought it was a bad idea. However, I was voted down, right? This is a democracy. It went to the ballot, and I was voted down. I lost 60-40 in my district. So 60% of the people that I represent said, we want legalization of recreational marijuana. End of story. I'm a public servant. So now my challenge is, because it's not approved at the federal level, people are carrying around bags of cash, okay, all these businesses, and that is not good. That's just going to create crime and disruption, and that's not good. So I signed on to a bill, we passed it through the House, that would basically create an exception under let me get the right bill, it's the Controlled Substance Act, Title II. That's what marijuana is in right now. So it would allow people to bank the proceeds, okay, from legal marijuana sales, recreational sales. That's sitting over in the Senate on McConnell's desk, waiting for consideration in the Senate. But, you know, so I agree with the sentiment. I agree with I try to get us there. You know, I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand that the people have chosen. This is democracy. This is the way it works. So that's where we're at.
Hi, I'm Kathy Rushfield, New York, and just getting back to the question about the flooding to kind of try to narrow that down a little bit. The proposals that you have about the berms and raising roads are interesting and may work in certain locations, but I'm concerned about the north end in particular because if you raise Atlantic Ave, the area in blue is still vulnerable, and because of the development that's already there along the waterfront, the area in blue doesn't work with the berm, and that's still vulnerable. So for our specific location here in the north end, what would you suggest to help? Because I don't know that it seems that berms or raising road would work here.
Well, if the water comes over the...
Right, if it's coming up over the blue area along all the wharfs, Atlantic Ave is in
Yeah,
the
so you
area.
have to protect the
Right, it's not going
roadways
to
here.
protect the area in blue, and neither
Yeah.
would berms, because you can't put berms somewhere that's already developed. So I'm just, you
No,
know,
I'm
I'm sure
saying-
there are other options besides those two, but I just didn't know if you had any other suggestions for our particular location.
I know that in the stretch along Carson Beach in South Boston, same thing, right along the water, they're talking about, let's say the roadway is at this level, right? And it goes to the curb. What they're suggesting now is raising the elevation of the road. You would do that with Commercial Street, I guess, or Atlantic Ave. And the road would be elevated, but it would be on top of a berm. So you've got a circular road here, or an arc, that protects most of the north end, at least on...
So what about the part that's in blue of all the wharfs? They wouldn't be protected.
The water would just stay on the walls.
Right. The wharf would be underwater. You guys have done it.
They live there.
We can't build a berm out on the wall.
What they do in Venice is they move to the second floor.
And we'd just be NEWRA.
No, that's a serious issue.
Right, there's a lot of development along our waterfront, so it doesn't, may not work.
Just a point of information, the berm idea is essentially what they're doing with the Langone Park renovation. They're raising the height of the field, in effect creating a berm along the stretch where the athletic fields are. So in certain areas, as the representative pointed out, it is feasible, even within an area, but again, it's not a pure solution.
Logan Airport, are they gonna berm Logan Airport right around it?
Yeah, they're gonna have to, yeah.
I mean, you're talking about something that's already at sea level.
Yeah, so we just we just shut down a couple of runways a year ago. We had to shut them down for 6 months to redo them. They would have to resurface them, well, they did resurface them, but the next time out, if they're threatened by by rising sea levels, they would have to raise them at the same time that they would resurface them. So, but it's a big process. It took 6 months. So they diverted all the planes to the other run, they call them the floors, I guess. But yeah, it's a big project, yes.
Mary is changing gears, gun control, in light of everything that's been going on, what do you see on that?
Yeah, so one of the first bills that we passed back in January when the Democrats took control of the House was H.R. 8, which is the bipartisan Enhanced Background Checks Act. So right now, the way the law works, if you're a licensed dealer, which is you're in the business of selling weapons, selling firearms, you have to do a background check on the person. If you are an individual and you're not in the business of selling firearms, you do not. You do not. You can just sell the weapon without doing a background check. What the enhanced background check would do, number one, is, in this H.R. 8, would require you, if you want to sell your gun, to sell it through a licensed dealer and require them to do the background check. So it would, some people call it a universal background check because everyone gets caught in that background check system. I think it would be a heck of a lot safer. We've seen some cases where people who should not have had weapons have them. The other bill we did was H.R. 1121, 1121. And right now also it is a law in this country that, let's go back to that example where the licensed seller is selling the gun, a firearm. He is required by law to check with the FBI and participate in the background check. It's called the NICS system, NICS system, the National Immediate Firearms something or other. Anyway, the FBI is required to do that background check in 3 days. 3 days. That's how long the FBI is given to do a background check on an individual that wants a firearm. If, under the law right now, if the FBI, with everything they got going on, is not able to complete that background check in 3 days, then the dealer is authorized to transfer the weapon, the firearm, without the background check. It's the law. And these dealers, that's how they make their money, right? So they wait the 72 hours and then the sale goes through. Our enhanced bill would give the FBI an extra 7 days beyond that to do further background checks. But at the end of 10 days, then they do have to do the sale. So it would give the FBI has said, look, we can do 99.9% of all of them in 5 days. If you gave us 10 days, you know, it'll take care of everything we need to do. So that's what, and I talked to Christopher Ray yesterday, the head of the FBI, we did a telephone conference on the shootings in El Paso and the one in Dayton and the one in California at the Garlic Festival. Yeah. So those are the, now, so H.R. 8 and H.R. 1121, we passed, well, you can tell because of the low number, right? H.R. 8 was the 8th bill that we passed when we took over the House in January. So it probably went out the 3rd week of January and sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. We had a full debate, we had hearings, we brought in witnesses, we did a markup, the Republicans proposed amendments, we proposed amendments. We got like 10 Republicans to sign on to the bill. We called it bipartisan, sent it over to the Senate. It's tied up in a little ribbon right on Mitch McConnell's desk. He could pass that this week if he brought the Senate into session and took the bill. Meanwhile, the president says President Trump, he says a lot of things, but the other day at his press conference, he said he supports background checks. And so you would think if he supports it, and obviously the House has supported it, then it should be, achievable in a very short term. I think the other thing is they poll this, like the press, the newspapers, they ask, American people, do you support, universal background checks? It polls like I think it polls 84% among Democrats and 79% among Republicans. You know, I don't get it why, well, I do get it, it's the NRA is threatening Republican members who are willing to vote for it. David?
I'm going to follow up on your comments regarding the NRA and refer to the comment that my neighbor made about addressing the cause rather than the symptom. And the cause to me seems to be the undue influence that campaign funds have on getting members to vote for Congress and the Senate elected or re-elected. Where do you stand on campaign finance reform? What can we do to get the money out of the government that's corrupting everyone
I think
that the majority of Americans don't want to?
I think our major obstacle is Citizens United. In that case, they equated corporations with people, so that the entire the entire political campaign system is awash with money. And so, not only awash with money, but you can't tell where it's coming from. So you have these super PACs that have billions of dollars. I know we talk about on the Republican side, but then on the Democratic side, George Soros. So there's no question here. You've got huge amounts of money coming into campaigns on behalf of special interests. And it would be great if we could cap the amount of money that come into campaigns and stop these outside groups from funding. I actually ran against Ed Markey for United States Senate several years ago. I lost that election. But at the beginning of it, both of us said, let's shake hands, let's sign an agreement, but neither one of us is going to take money from outside groups. That we're going to just go to individual donors and we'll block the outside groups. No independent expenditures. So an independent expenditure might be the Koch brothers. They like this Republican. So even though he doesn't ask for the money, they get into his race and they run ads, attacking his opponent. And those are independent expenditures. So Ed and I agreed that was totally unfair and a distortion of the democratic process. So we both held to it. I mean, I lost, but I think we ran a clean race. I talked to Ed the other day, who was commiserating about what's going on right now.
Unfortunately, candidates always pledge not to take money until they get elected, and then it's a whole different ballgame. Even President Obama was guilty of campaigning on campaign reform and then signing up for all the PAC money again.
But he ran for president, so that's $1 billion game, in terms of running for president.
It's bipartisan.
Oh yeah, it is. There's 23 candidates out there right now.
So it'd be great if we could come up with a solution to this.
Hi.
I'm Lisa Green. I'm a mom here in the North End. I'm so delighted to see you here in person in this room where I have my kid's birthday party. So thank you for coming. I'm in the blue zone, so I'm also eager to hear about that. I'm really here to speak on behalf of a few friends of mine, several friends of mine who couldn't be here. And some people are in the room tonight if anybody wants to stand up. I've been over to your office in South Boston several times over the past several weeks, along with over 100 other constituents from across the district. Moms like me, granddads, disabled veterans, teachers, doctors, union members, children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. All shared their heartfelt concerns with your staff and asked 3 very basic questions for you, the person representing us in Congress. The first question, and I'll go through them, and then I'll give you a chance to answer at the end. The first question is, what is your position on current U.S. policy on family detention in border camps? The second question is, do you believe that it's the constitutional responsibility of Congress, specifically the Oversight Committee, to investigate possible grounds for impeachment through public hearings? And the third question, a much more basic question, was, will you hold a town hall in our district during the congressional recess now in August to provide an opportunity for anyone from your district to ask their representative questions? So each time we asked your staff those questions, they told us they didn't know your position. That's on two of the most central issues facing our country today, and a simple scheduling question. I know it's not simple, but it's a scheduling question. They said they'd check in with you and get back to us, and they never did. So that's why I'm so delighted to see you here tonight, so we can hear answers from you directly. It's a nice opportunity for those of us who managed to find out about this event. Hosted, thank you to NEWRA for hosting it. But you represent over 740,000 constituents in District 8, and these are not conversations for small rooms, right? You're the only person who can represent us in the United States Congress. Your constituents can't get answers from your staff, and you haven't held a town hall in years. We're here, and I'll pass off to one of my other comrades who've been here with me, but we really appreciate the opportunity to hear from you, but it shouldn't just be for us, because we managed to find out about being here. It should be for everyone in the district to be able to ask you questions and hear from you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so my name's Tanya. I'm the person who's been making visits to your office. I've been 4 times. I've spent 4 lunch hours. I've spent so many hours getting people to come. When I found out about this meeting, I'm going to get to what I've been asking for at the office. We were in your office on the 2nd. This meeting was posted on the 31st. We were asking when you could hold the town hall or when you were going to be speaking in public, and your staff told us in person on that day that they were working on it. We should have been told in that meeting that there was this meeting happening, if this is a public meeting. I have called your Washington, D.C. office because your staff in Boston said that they couldn't make the call to Megan to find out about scheduling. I called your office every single day. I was told every single day, Megan will call you back today. Guess who I have never heard back from? So in addition to Lisa's question, if your office is unable to schedule a town hall, which seems to be a concern, I have already gone and scheduled space in Quincy, because Quincy is the most central location in your district, so that the majority of your district can make it on the 22nd from 6 to 9 p.m. I hope you will come and give the rest of your district the opportunity to come hear from you and to hear from them. And it's not just the Boston office. I had people go to Quincy. I had people go to Brockton. It is your entire district that wants the opportunity to have a face-to-face with you. It shouldn't be 2.5 years.
And if
Wait a
anybody
minute.
else is
Okay.
interested, sorry,
Let me-
you can give us your email address.
Okay, yeah. So here's the deal. First of all, you came to my office at days when you knew that I was in session in Washington.
Yeah.
So there was zero chance for me to leave Washington and meet with you, okay? In fairness now, I was voting on this, I'm doing my job, right?
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, I am one of the few members of Congress that actually goes to town meetings. This is sort of a town meeting for the neighborhood of the North End. But Brockton, Norwood, Walpole, you say, I bet I've been to 20 New England town meetings in the last 2 years, probably 20. The problem for me is that there are 5, so I have 22 towns and 3 cities that I represent. The problem for me is they're all on the same day at the same time. Some of them are at 7, some might be 7:30, and I run from town to town. Number one. I speak at those New England town meetings. I do updates on Washington, D.C., what I'm doing, and then I meet with constituents afterwards if they have any either personal issues or political issues that they wish to discuss. Okay. As far as a town meeting, and like I've had town meetings that have had 700-800 people at it. I've had them very, very small. I actually think that a meeting like this said this is not good for discussion. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect when you have now, and you'll see, because I'll do town meetings. First of all, we spoke to the mayor of Braintree, Joe Sullivan. He's going to allow us to use Braintree Town Hall for a town hall meeting, a community, a district-wide.
In August?
I believe it is August, yeah. 21st or 22nd.
So to that,
What's that?
To that, because you are in charge of your office could have saved me so much time, and I had to send a deposit because your office has not called me back to say that they had done that.
Well, they did say they were working on it, right? So we were told that Weymouth Abigail, we were going to do Abigail Adams Middle School. They told us very recently that that was not available. Where else did we try?
We believe that you're trying to schedule it. I don't want to get off on a
I think it was
logistical
Bridgewater
conversation.
State College, but that's not necessarily centrally located. It's the lower part of my district and probably be inconvenient for a lot of people. We contacted like 4 different locations, but the mayor of Braintree, that holds, roughly 300 people, and we will do that. The other question you had was regarding, so I just get back from El Paso, the border with Mexico. I went through the Customs and Border Patrol camps there. They've changed the U.S. policy there. They are no longer housing people in the processing areas, so-called camps. And now most of the applicants for asylum and refugees are at shelters on the Mexican Ciudad Juarez border areas. And I also visited the ICE detention facilities as well. Met with all of the local, most of them are faith-based advocacy groups on behalf of immigrants. And by the way, that was probably my 16th detention area that I have visited since I've been in Congress. So, been to Darfur, been to 5 different camps in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen twice, Gaza a couple of times. So this is an area that I work on in Congress. I've been to more immigrant detention camps than probably any other member of Congress. So that's what I do. I know that your group was keenly interested in seeing me go to that location, but just so you know, I had already gone to 15 others. Not only that, I had already made a trip to Guatemala to meet with the officials down there and try to figure out what the pushback was. I had already made a trip to El Salvador.
So can I ask you a question then, because you're talking about all these other countries' camps?
Yeah.
Are you equating that you felt you could adequately judge the conditions of our camps that are on our borders because you have visited them in other countries? Because if that is the case, the conditions in the other countries are atrocious.
Because my colleagues went down and came back and gave us full reports on what was going in those camps. Just like I went to the other camps, came back and explained to them what was going on in those other countries and why we needed to act. So we had, look, the group that I went with was 25 members of Congress. As soon as session was over, all of us, 25 of us, first chance we got, all went down, 25 of us with Veronica Escobar went down to the border.
So you had less time than the other representatives that were able to get down there well before you?
Yeah, because we had the 25th anniversary of the Normandy landing. A lot of members went down to Mexico instead of to go. My committee, we went to Normandy instead. It was important for us to be there. One other week, the only time we get to go was on the weekend. The other weekend, we chose to go to the Munich Security Conference, which is it's a big gathering of, mostly NATO countries, but also some of the countries outside of NATO as well. Very important for my committee. So
all that is wonderful, and I hope that you hear us as constituents. If that is the case, the interactions with your office were infuriating because we could not get an answer.
It's encouraging to hear that you.
Yes,
I know that
different than how we were interacted with. It was and it's fine, and I'm glad to hear that you're making this process. But as a constituent, it should not be this difficult to get an answer. That's all I'm saying. We can dance around all the scheduling. It's just as a constituent, it should not be this difficult to figure out where you stand on all these issues. It just shouldn't.
And what's the downside of holding a town
wait a
hall?
minute, though. Wait a minute. But I think
people in the back can't see over you.
social media.
It also feels like a sort of a mob right now.
Yeah, right. That's how it felt in my office.
And I'm a North Ender. I feel like I have to apologize Because this is sort of out of control.
I don't think it is.
You know what?
I don't think it's out of control.
Time out, time out. This is life now. This is life.
That's true.
This is life. So I have to accept it.
standing up
I
in
have
the
to
room,
accept it.
a mob now? I'm sorry, I can't, we
A
can't
whole
stand
bunch
up.
of people standing at the same
Yes,
time?
6
Yes.
people
You know what?
Yeah, that's a little.
Ford, you had your turn, let her have her turn.
Yeah, I was asked a question.
So,
I have a
so,
question too, let's get back to the question.
So
No,
you
no, no,
let's
no, I
let
think-
other people ask questions too, so could you finish asking your questions? That would
Sure.
be great.
The impeachment question, would anybody like to ask that?
yeah, so, let me answer that, because you did ask that. I mean, right now, I'm on 2 committees that are conducting the investigation of Donald J. Trump and the Trump companies. One is the Financial Services Committee with Maxine Waters. We're investigating his dealings with Deutsche Bank, both when he was a private citizen, also leading up to today. So we have subpoenaed his accounting firm. We've won a battle seeking documents from his accounting firm in district court, Southern District of New York. So the decision went to us that the judge decided that we are entitled to that information. So they've appealed it. So the appeals court will rule on that in late September, early October, to decide whether they get that information or not. The other is with Elijah Cummings, and I'm on an investigation. The other investigating committee is the oversight committee, and we're working on that as well. Some of that involves what we believe might be violations of the clause that prevents the president, emoluments clause, which he receives undue benefits because of his position. So we have those 2 investigations. But let me just cut to the chase here. If we proceed right now, right this minute, on impeachment proceedings, we will lose in the Senate, okay? So we will impeach him in the House. It will go to a trial in the Senate. It's a trial in the Senate, but the jury is made up of 100 politicians, 100 senators. We know we will lose because the jury has said we will lose.
On principle,
not-
the majority of your
No,
colleagues disagree with you.
Let me finish. They have told us, we will vote against impeachment, we will vote to acquit the president. So, here's what you want to do. You want to impeach him in the House, send it over to the Senate, where they will acquit him and say he did nothing wrong. And he will go into the election against the Democratic challenger, and you will have given him 4 more years as President of the United States. You will put him in office. Think about what the Supreme Court will look like with 4 more years of Donald Trump.
A majority of your colleagues
know what you
disagree
want?
with
You want a hooray, we impeach him in the House. And that will be nothing when the Senate acquits him. You are helping him. He begs you to try to impeach him. He has the votes. It's not like we're going to an objective jury that's going to weigh the facts and the evidence, unless we have really something smoking on him. The Republican senators who are his jury have said, we will vote to acquit him. I'm not making it up. They have said it. So I'll do anything to make sure that he does not get 4 more years. That's my position. I will do everything possible in my power to make sure he does not get 4 more years. And what you're asking for is to help the president, help get him reelected. And I am not into that. I am not. So now, look. Here's what I'm hoping. That either or both of those district court appeals are successful, and that we get that critical evidence. Remember, the only reason that Nixon was impeached was because the evidence was so strong. The Republican senators circled him in a phalanx. They were standing with him until the tapes came out and a number of other witnesses came forward.
How did they come out?
Excuse me?
How did they come out? They came out through investigation.
Just let him finish.
Right. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing 2 investigations, remember? You're the one that wants to cut off the investigation and go to impeachment. Because when we're in court, we say we need this information because we're weighing impeachment.
I didn't
If we
say that
move
that was
forward
the
with
question. The question was
impeachment now,
impeachment inquiry.
we're telling the judge, we have enough evidence already, we don't need any more, we're going to impeachment. And then the judge will say, well, obviously you don't need this evidence, it works against us. But here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that in these two investigations with Maxine Waters and with Elijah Cummings, that we are successful, that now it needs to go to the appeals court. They're gonna rule on this. If we get the information, that'll be great. And I'm hoping that the information will be such that it persuades those, even if we get, a half dozen of these senators, maybe it starts to cause others to think about their place in history and what they might be held guilty of in defending someone who has all this evidence against them. So I'm trying to win. I don't want to just impeach him. I want to have him removed from office. That's my position. This is not a game. There's no reason to impeach him if you can't get rid of him.
We were asking about an impeachment inquiry, public hearings. We weren't asking about impeachment.
Well, I think you're splitting the hairs.
Yeah, John has a question. This is going to be the last one because we have to take up ZLC.
No, is there any
See, nothing?
waves?
Okay.
It would be anticlimactic. That's okay.
My wife hasn't called me yet, so I can't.
You're doing fine. Keep going.
Oh, have you?
Do you have a question?
Yeah,
I
last
have
one. Is there any update on moving the post office headquarters?
Nothing yet. I was on a conference call yesterday with Margaret Brennan, who's the Postmaster General, but we talked about some other issues regarding voting by mail in this upcoming election. The Trump administration is pulling us out of this treaty with other countries so that Americans living overseas can vote in the 2020 election, including our military. So that was the issue we talked about with Margaret Brennan. But I'll try to follow up on that to get more information. I haven't revisited that in a while, but thank you.
I actually have a question about big tech.
Okay.
Legislation. What is the Congress going to do about regulating big tech and privacy? The Apples, the Googles, Amazon,
yeah.
Facebook. I mean, that's really, really important. Everybody in this room has a phone.
Yeah. So actually, I'm the chair of the task force on financial technology. So whether you know it or not, Facebook is vacuuming up a lot of what they call behavioral surplus. They know who your friends are, right? They know everything that you do online. They know where you go. They know what you buy. They know now some of the insurance companies know, whether you drive a little crazy when your kids are late for school and you're trying to get them. They know everything about you, and if you read I know you never have, but there's the privacy agreement on your phone. Where you click I agree. It's about a 14-page thing. Nobody reads it. But it basically gives Facebook the ability to vacuum up all your information and sell it. The privacy agreement is actually a lack of privacy agreement. There's a couple of great books out there. Shoshana Zuboff called Surveillance Capitalism, which is very, very good. And the one I'm reading right now is by Dave. Life After Google. I forget the guy's last name, but excellent, two excellent books, and it describes the problem that we're having.
Yeah, I work in the industry, I know.
Oh, okay, all right. With big data. So what we're trying to do is, one of the things we're trying to do is to prevent companies like Facebook and, hey, look, if you're a 14-year-old kid, you've got to click I agree, right? Because you can't go through life without being on Facebook or Instagram or whatever and having access to the internet. But so everybody clicks I agree. What we're trying to do is institute language in statute that would prevent Facebook or any of these internet service providers from saying either you click agree or you get nothing. that's a contract of adhesion. So we're trying to take some of the power away from Facebook and others, Google, so that they can't back you into an unfair contract, number one. Secondly, what we'd like to do is to create a fiduciary responsibility on the part of those companies that you deal with to protect your data, so they can't sell it to other people. So at least it's contained. Number three is the right to be forgotten. Basically, to basically have the ability to have all your stuff deleted so people can't, take advantage of it. We just had a huge hack, 100 million, yeah, 100 million people.
Capital One.
Capital One, yeah, 100 million people. Social Security numbers, you name it. So it's all hackable, we've got the model out there just doesn't work for privacy. The current model that we have, so we've got to change that. There is no privacy, right? There is no. So. I think the Europeans are a little bit ahead of us. They got this GDPR, which is the General Data Protection.
Is there any legislation pending on this topic?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different bills, but again, nothing's really progressing in the Senate. There are a number of senators who are, I think Chuck Grassley, who's a Republican, he's on one, but he's probably the exception over there. But that's another issue where I think there might be some bipartisan agreement.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your meeting.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for being involved. Thank you.